Hello and welcome to Into Vietnam Weekend. We'll bring you comprehensive news on Vietnam's economy throughout the past week and following our major stories. Vietnam's November CPI increase hit 1.86%, the highest in 15 years. Local authorities revoked the investment license of a $4.15 billion resort project. And our conversation with Mr. Mathias Duehn, Director of EuroCham Vietnam, on the White Book of Trade Investment Issues in Vietnam. But first, let's have a look at the figures of the week.
Prime Minister Duehn announced at the National Assembly meeting on Wednesday that Vietnam's Consumer Price Index (CPI) in November is estimated to have surged 1.86% from October. The increase expanded the CPI rise to 9.58% in the first 11 months of this year. This was driven by higher prices of education, food and construction materials. Prices of education services posted the biggest surge of 19% from January to November. Both food and construction materials saw the second biggest increase of 13% from the beginning of this year. Gold prices surged 23.31% from December 2009 as a result of global price hike and global gold holding. Earlier, Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi posted November CPI increases of 1.73% and 1.93% on month respectively. Preliminary figures released by the General Statistics Office showed that Vietnam's trade deficit widened 16% to $1.25 billion in November from $1.08 billion in October. The trade deficit was $10.66 billion in the 11 months through November. Exports rose 4% to $6.45 billion in November from $6.23 billion in October, while imports gained 5% to $7.7 billion from $7.3 billion last month. In the 11 months through November, exports climbed 24.5% to $64.28 billion, while imports jumped 19.8% to $74.94 billion. The Foreign Investment Agency under the Ministry of Planning and Investment said that the disbursements of foreign direct investment (FDI) in Vietnam totaled $9.95 billion in the January-November period, up 10% year-on-year. During the period, the country attracted $13.3 billion in new and additional FDI, down 16% from the same period last year. The annual target of $22 to $25 billion seems almost out of reach. A total of 74 new foreign invested projects was licensed in November, worth a combined $512 billion.
The Ministry of Finance said on Thursday that the disbursement of official development assistance in Vietnam is likely to be $4.27 billion this year, up 3.2% from last year. The disbursement of development assistance fell short of expectations due to the country's lack of readiness to absorb the funds. Development assistance, foreign investment, and remittances often compensate for Vietnam's persistent trade deficit. International donors are expected to meet early next month in Hanoi. They plan to review the disbursement of their official development aid to Vietnam this year and also announce their pledges for the country for 2011. We'll now move on to securities news. The Vietnamese stock market rebounded in the week between November the 22nd and the 26th on the stabilization of foreign exchange and gold markets. Local investors hunted for bargains as stock prices had fallen to very low levels. On Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange, VN Index closed the week at 439.94 points, up 13.43 points or 3.14% from the previous Friday. The market liquidity recovered to exceed more than $1 trillion on the final session of the week, the highest level in recent months. In Hanoi, HNX index passed the 100 threshold to close the week at 101.57 points. The benchmark rose 2.47 points or 2.49% from the previous Friday. The market liquidity averaged 32.8 million units, worth 567 billion dongs per day. The figures went up 22% in volume and 16% in value from the week before. Foreign investors continue to net buy on the southern bourse, but they net sold on the northern one. These players net bought more than 4.4 million units, worth over 241 billion dongs on Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange. Meanwhile, they net sold some 1.9 million shares, worth more than 32 billion dongs on Hanoi Stock Exchange. The State Bank of Vietnam, or SBV, on Wednesday decided to allow local gold dealers to import the precious metal from November the 24th to December the 31st. This is one of its efforts to narrow the gap between local gold prices and global ones. Last month, the central bank granted gold import quotas valid for 14 days to calm down the domestic gold frenzy. Domestic gold prices hovered around 35 million dongs per tael on Saturday morning, close to the global level. The Southeast Asia Commercial Bank, or CBank, on Friday morning increased its one-month deposit interest rate in Vietnamese dong to 13% per annum. This is the first bank to have raised its short-term deposit interest rates in the local currency to over 13% per annum. Vietnamese dong deposit rates are 13.1% and 13.2% per annum for 2-month and 3-month terms respectively. The rates for 12-month and 13-month terms have risen to 13.5% from 13%. Many banks are now raising dong deposit rates to at least 13% per year, but the interest rates of more than 13% are not commonly offered for terms under 3 months. Vietnam has been making progress by identifying some 6,000 administrative procedures to be simplified under National Project 30, but the country is facing challenges in executing the simplification and expanding the scope of the administrative reform. Representatives of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, made the statement in a press conference held on Thursday in Hanoi to review the project. Speaking at the press conference, Vice General Secretary of OECD Mario Amano praised Vietnam's progress in identifying thousands of administrative procedures to be simplified. But he stressed the Vietnamese government is now in the critical point of cutting the procedures deemed unnecessary. The government is expected to cut some 6,000 administrative procedures in December. OECD called on the Vietnamese authorities to move forward to a comprehensive regulatory reform. The Vietnamese government has been carrying out Project 30 since 2007 to reduce at least 30% of administrative procedures. Officials estimate the reduction will save some $1.5 billion in cost of paperwork for citizens and businesses every year. OECD has been invited to review the progress of the project since June this year. VITV reporter had an interview with 2 experts from OECD at the press conference. They will give us insights into the implementation of Project 30 and recommendations for effective regulatory reforms in Vietnam. Thank you very much for joining the ITV interview today. First of all, would you like to comment on the achievements as well as the shortcomings of Project 30 in Vietnam?
There are many achievements of Project 30, but the most is yet to be done. Of course, there is this internet database of all the administrative procedures, which we think is a very important achievement here in Vietnam to make regulation more transparent, more accessible. There are many, almost 6,000 simplification proposals for simplification of administrative procedures, but of course these proposals are again yet to be implemented. And implementation is probably the most critical process. So we think that Vietnam needs to focus now on implementation, on proper implementation of all of these simplification proposals, so businesses can feel the real effect of administrative simplification here in Vietnam. About the weaknesses, we may say that there are not real weaknesses of the program. There are rather challenges that needs to be faced in the future, and one of them is strengthening communication and cooperation with stakeholders outside administration, with businesses and citizens. There is an advisory committee for administrative procedure reform that consists of representatives of businesses, but the cooperation with this body needs to be more regular, more continuous, more systematic, more at the working level as well. There must be a dialogue, a two-way process between the government and stakeholders, and there must be real partnership and cooperation. And this is why we suggest in our report to institutionalize more the advisory committee, to extend its membership, and to make it again more like an advisory working body for the government.
And what are the plans for future cooperation between OECD and Vietnam regarding administrative reforms and some other areas?
We have a couple of ideas in mind. First, I should mention that the OECD, I think, is a unique place, a unique forum to work with Vietnam. We can basically mobilize a network of government officials who are responsible for regulatory matters in their own countries. So we'd like to have a seminar perhaps with the Vietnamese authority, bringing together some of our own government officials to talk about how you can move forward on administrative simplification, also how you can move forward on a number of other areas related to regulatory management. This would include perhaps a seminar on regulatory impact analysis, how Vietnam might be able to implement a program in that area. Also, our report finds that public consultation probably needs to be expanded here, so we could perhaps explain how various OECD countries are engaged in public consultation and how those practices might be applied here.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hanoi posted a trade deficit of some $12 billion in the first 11 months, while the country reported a trade surplus of $5.6 billion for agroforestry and seafood exports. More details in the following news.
Hanoi's export revenue is estimated at $770.1 million in November, up 3.1% from the previous month and 51% from the same period last year. Between January and November, the city exported $7.186 billion worth of products, a year-on-year increase of 25.1%. Garment, textile, electronics and glass products, among others, posted export revenue growth of more than 30%. Meanwhile, the city imported $1.812 billion worth of products this month, up 6% on month and 1.2% on year. The figure brought the total number to $19.139 billion in the January and November period, a year-on-year increase of 13.3%. The report shows that the export revenue of agriculture, forestry, and seafood products in November are estimated at $1.75 billion. The figure for the first 11 months amounted to $17.23 billion, a year-on-year rise of 22.51%. The import value of agricultural, forestry, and seafood products also surged to some $11.58 billion in the first 11 months. The export revenue of agricultural products between January and November is estimated at $8.82 billion, up 21.98% on year. In the same period, the revenue of seafood exports is estimated at $4.55 billion, up 17.86%. The revenue of forestry export is estimated at $3.23 billion, up 31.42%. The country shipped 6.3 million tons of rice for $2.95 billion between January and November. The figures rose by 12.3% on year in quantity and 17.8% in value. Notably, cashew export exceeded $1 billion for the first time ever.
In the next part of the program, Investment in Focus, we will cover foreign investment in Vietnam and the country's collaboration with other partners around the world. The authorities of the central province of Quảng Nam have revoked the investment license for the $4.15 billion Dragon Beach ecotourism complex. They said the move came because the U.S. investors failed to start the projects as required. The resort of 400 hectares invested by Tano Capital and Global C&D was licensed last September, but the joint venture failed to pay for site clearance and resettlement. Vietnamese local authorities were required in September this year to review the execution pace of foreign invested projects. The Ministry of Finance issued a circular on November the 18th, providing guidelines on the transfer of profits abroad by foreign investors. The new circular takes effect in 45 days from the date it was promulgated.
The new circular distinguishes between annual transfers and transfers made upon the completion of investment and business operations in Vietnam. Annually transferred profits are net profits earned from direct investment in a fiscal year. The amounts are based on either audited financial statements or corporate income tax declarations of their enterprise, less profits that have been reinvested in Vietnam. Profits to be transferred upon completion of investment are total net profits earned from the investment in Vietnam, less profits that have been reinvested in the country and amount already transferred abroad. Foreign investors are strictly prohibited from transferring profits abroad when there have been accumulated losses under audited financial statements after losses have been carried forward from the previous year in accordance with the law on corporate income tax. Foreign investors must submit a notice in accordance with Vietnamese regulations to tax authorities before commencing any transfer of profits abroad.
Japan's SBI Holdings on Thursday announced that SBI Securities Company has acquired a 20% stake of FPT Securities Joint Stock Company. The Japanese stock firm will buy new shares to be issued by the Vietnamese broker in a private placement. Japanese newspaper Nikkei said the deal's value is 2 billion yen, but SBI's press release did not mention this number. With the Vietnamese stock market projected to grow, the Japanese firm intends to strengthen its partnership with the FPT Group. SBI Securities is also considering trading Vietnamese stocks in Japan. The European Chamber of Commerce, or EuroCham in Vietnam, on Thursday announced its third edition of White Book of Trade, Investment Issues and Recommendations. The 2011 version covers 17 major industries that over 700 member companies of the EuroCham operate in Vietnam, like banking, energy, pharmaceuticals, and fast-moving consumer products. On one hand, the publication shows that good progress has been made in upgrading the regulatory framework, licensing and infrastructure. On the other hand, it indicates delays and difficulties that EuroCham's member companies have experienced in project implementation and the enforcement of intellectual property rights. Moreover, the book states that structural reforms to increase the efficiency of the Vietnamese economy must remain high in the country's agenda, including the equitization of state-owned enterprises. In this week's Talk With Us, we had a talk with Mr. Mathias Duehn, Director of EuroCham Vietnam. He will give us more insights into the White Book of Trade, Investment Issues and Recommendations for Vietnam.
Well, hello, Mr. Mathias Duehn, and thank you for joining with VITV's interview today. First of all, can you share with us some more information about the White Book that EuroCham is launching today?
EuroCham is launching today the third edition of its White Book, and it's a book of recommendations to the Vietnamese government in 15 key areas that affect the business climate in Vietnam. It is not something to teach the Vietnamese a lesson, it's more an outside advice of how we see things in key areas in Vietnam.
And how do you choose the 15 areas to analyze in the book?
Well, our members feedback to us what are their problems in Vietnam or where they feel they have the most issues. So it's not a catalogue of issues, we're not covering everything, but we're covering only the areas in which our members would see difficulties or challenges, and such areas may be, for example, the public-private partnerships, infrastructure. It may be industries such as pharmaceuticals industries or the banking industry, and it affects and other general areas such as M&A or investment licensing, which also plays a major role for our companies.
Well, as I understand, the White Book talk about what the Vietnamese government has accomplished and also what are left to be done. So should we talk about the positive first? Can you share with us some more information about what EuroCham consider has been Vietnam's accomplishment in improving its business environment?
That is correct. Our White Book contains a progress report that covers all the areas we are talking about, and I'm quite happy to say that for this year we have some progress in areas. I would say we have small steps forward in various areas. Challenges still remain, and one such area is infrastructure and public-private partnerships. We welcome that the government has just passed the Decision 71 on pilot public-private partnership projects, which for the first time sets out a framework for PPP investment. So this will hopefully very helpful in the infrastructure area, just as one example.
Vietnam is now trying to get the administrative procedures online through Project 30. In your opinion, what has been the accomplishments of this Project 30?
Well, I think it's too early to say. You know that the Project 30 is a very ambitious project by the government. No, it's a great project. EuroCham has supported it a lot, and we have seen resolutions to simplify 258 procedures. We have seen the establishment of a post-Project 30 mechanism. However, the hard work still needs to be done. We have that resolution now, but the resolution also means that you actually have to change all the laws and circulars and decrees, and the agencies are now working in their departments on actually implementing it, and that is a huge task, and that doesn't get the camera lights. And nobody is interested in the day-to-day hard work that this requires. So we encourage Vietnam to continue with that, and to also give a little more visibility to all the good people who work on simplifying these procedures in their offices day to day.
The inflation of Vietnam has been on the rise in recent months. So what has been the impact of this on the investment environment of Vietnam?
I think inflation is an important issue. Inflation is always connected to growth. So you cannot grow a country without having inflation. So inflation is not a bad thing in itself. It's a natural thing that happens if the economy develops. However, if it puts pressure on the local currency, this is something we have to be careful about. This is a trust issue.
The main objective of the book is to give the Vietnamese government some recommendations in order to improve the business environment and its competitiveness. So can you highlight some of the key recommendations that EuroCham has put in the book?
Well, we have 5 key areas, basically, the ones we mentioned already. You chose the right ones. Investment licensing. Yeah. We recommend implementing a full one-stop shop approach, so that investors can actually apply and operate their business relatively quickly. So it does not take 6 months. It takes 6 weeks, hopefully. The second one is improving enforcement of intellectual property rights, enforcing the penalties, and enabling the authorities to take quick actions when action is needed with regards to enforcement. The third area we see is encouraging infrastructure projects by promoting public-private partnerships, and we have seen the new decision by the Prime Minister, which is very good, and we hope that now pilot projects will be implemented, and from these pilot projects we can actually create a real framework for all infrastructure projects, and we are ready to help with this. And the fourth point is human resources. vocational training, upgrading the quality of Vietnam's labor force is a huge issue if you want to make better things. Companies that are coming to Vietnam are not looking for cheap labor only, they are actually now looking for more qualified people, and that is very important to upgrade the quality of the labor force as the country develops. And the last point is continuing administrative reform that we also mentioned, to not lose the momentum and actually do the hard work that is required now with translating everything into the circulars, decrees and the laws.
And in your opinion, how is the outlook for European investment into Vietnam in the future?
Absolutely, Vietnam is more on the radar screen of European investors. In fact, many investors are looking at Vietnam. They are asking us when are we going to get the legal framework? When are we getting better rules for doing M&A? They are waiting and seeing, and with the economy recovering, the European investors are ready to come to Vietnam.
And once again, thank you for joining with VITV today.
Thank you.
The conversation has concluded our program this week. Thank you for watching. For comments and feedback, send us an email at intovietnam@vitv.vn or call us at 04 222 08288 or 0904 111 686. Thank you for now, and don't forget to tune in for our daily evening news.